Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Barry Schwartz, and this is the Search Buzz video recap. Today is Friday, August 12th, and this is the search news we covered over at the Search Engine Roundtable at seroundtable.com over the past week. Lots to discuss. Google's launched a bunch of new features around feature snippets, where it gained MUM capabilities, gained the consciousness, and so much more. Google broke really badly this week, affecting indexing, pages dropping out of the index. People thought their rankings were just exploding. It was pretty wild. I'll get into that as well. There was also some Google ranking tremors and stuff like that. Google Lens is now Google image search. Local spam guidelines were updated for Google Posts. So much more. You definitely want to stay tuned. There's a lot to discuss. I'd like to thank our sponsor, SEMrush. Thank you so much, SEMrush, for sponsoring. They're a beloved SEO tool set. You can also get this swag of the hat, travel cup, socks, etc. Go to their SEMrush store. You can buy that if you want, or just download their tool set. Check it out. It's pretty cool stuff. So thank you, SEMrush, for sponsoring. Deeply, deeply appreciated. Okay, so first up, yesterday morning, I covered how Google has announced a bunch of new features around featured snippets. Features on featured snippets. Now, this is pretty big news. I think the SEO industry did catch wind of this in a very big way, which is great. Now, feature snippets are going to be using MUM, which is one of the few applications that Google's MUM is actually being used. It's been used in like a few places, and this is a big way in Google search where Google's using MUM. Specifically, they're using MUM to figure out if there's a consensus, not an expert consensus, but a general consensus across the web for what people are saying about a specific type of query, the premise of a query, and using that to, in the callout features, the bolder, here's like an example of that, like the bolder, larger font section of the feature snippet to kind of say, this is what the answer to your query is based on the consensus, the general consensus across the web. Very interesting. There's a lot of confusion around this feature. Again, I spoke to Pandu and a bunch of other people at Google about this, and he basically said, we found that this consensus-based technique has meaningfully improved the quality and helpfulness of the feature snippet callouts. So again, it's using MUM for that. Their systems are able to check snippets callouts against other high-quality sources on the web to see if there's a general consensus for that callout, even if the sources are using different words or concepts to describe the same thing. That's where the MUM comes in, which is pretty interesting. And the concept around high-quality sources is basically other high-ranking websites. Now, MUM is not figuring out what the high-quality sources are. MUM is figuring out the consensus of the verbiage, meaning if one website is saying this, this, and that, and the other website is saying that, this, and this, but they're saying the same thing in different ways, then Google's be able to use MUM to figure out what the callout should be, which is very, very, very cool. Now, this feature, this consensus stuff is not being used for rankings. Pandu from the Vice President of Search, Pandu Nayak from Vice President of Search, and a fellow at Google basically said, no, this is not being used for rankings. It's just being used in the case for figuring out the consensus across the web. Although he went on to explain how feature snippets, which is also powers people also ask, there's a new feature where Google is showing 40% less false premise queries, where they're showing less feature snippets for false premise queries. And false premise queries, like if you search for something that is factually incorrect, it's just not true, and Google knows it's not true, like Snoopy assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Snoopy was not around to assassinate Abraham Lincoln back then. Snoopy is not a real person. Google's gonna be like, oh, you didn't really mean Snoopy. You basically meant when was Abraham Lincoln assassinated? And Google will show you and remove the Snoopy part from this. And so Google is kind of de-ranking feature snippets, or maybe not de-ranking, but removing the Snoopy using the consensus, which is pretty interesting. I asked Google to clarify the concept around not using it for ranking versus using it for feature snippets. And again, I think it's really about understanding the query and the consensus verbiage across multiple sources that are trusted in Google and so forth. So that's very, very big news. Definitely take a look at those feature snippets. They may have changed. Google also has published a bunch of new features around about this result. It expanded in 8 more languages: Portuguese, French, Italian, German, Dutch, Spanish, Japanese, Indonesian, and that's coming later this year. And also Google's adding more information around the about this result. Google even told us it was used 2.4 billion times. It seems a lot, pretty small for Google searches. But in the event, what's coming is they're going to be able to show how widely sources are circulated, online reviews about sources or companies, and whether a company is owned by another entity, or even when Google systems can find much information about the source. And also Google's expanding the content advisories. You know, that little snippet that Google shows that it looks like there aren't many great matches for your search. Basically, Google's saying, we can't find great search results for you. Google is expanding that to also include not just when it doesn't find great results, but also when it doesn't have high confidence in the overall quality of the results available in search. So Google's going to go ahead and show that as well in those areas, which is very, very interesting. So definitely take a look at that blog post. It was posted yesterday morning, Thursday morning at Search Engine Roundtable. Second biggest news is that Google broke, maybe bigger news than the other one, that Google broke this week, literally broke. There was some type of outage. Someone said it was related to a data center fire, which Google said the outage was not related to the data center fire, which I don't know. It is what it is. Any event, Google had a major outage starting August 9th, super early in the morning, throughout the whole entire day. That outage basically resulted in a bunch of SEOs saying, where are my URLs? Why am I not ranking anymore? Why is Google not indexing new stuff? Why is Google removing pages that were ranking for really a long time, no longer ranking? And a lot of people picked up on this. The tool sensor tools across all of them went crazy both on August 9th and August 10th until Google fixed it. Leveled out today, thankfully. But if you saw some massive changes to your rankings, to your traffic, to your visibility on or around August 9th, it should be resolved. You were not alone. It was a Google bug, and they fixed it. Interesting thing, really, Google didn't really comment about the search quality issues around this issue. John Mueller basically hinted that, yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll hopefully be fixed soon. But Google just commented about the outage in the plant in Ohio, I believe, the data center in Ohio. And sadly, 3 Google workers were injured. I hope they're okay. But again, everything seems to be back to normal. I'm not sure if that incident was related to this, but if you did see changes around August 9th and it returned, you were not alone. It's all good. You didn't do anything on your end. It's on Google's end. On the weekend, Saturday, August 6th, there was other ranking fluctuations, normal tremors that we see that spike up, a lot of SEO chatter around that, a lot of sensors showing the track things there. Was it a product reviews tremor? I don't know. I don't think so. But there's definitely, you can see by these charts, definitely a lot of chatter there. Even Glenn Gay picked up on it and noted about it. So we will see what's going on with that. I think more and more is probably going to come around this, especially around the product reviews update, because supposedly that product reviews update was pretty weak and pretty bad. I did actually the story on Search Engine Land how the data providers in aggregate, not on the individual level, but an aggregate across all sectors, showed that the product reviews update was much weaker than previous product review updates. But again, if you were hit by this product review update, you may have saw a 20, 40, 80% or more traffic drop, which means it was huge for you. So again, I'm not minimizing anything that you saw with that. I'm just saying it was definitely not as widespread as previous product reviews updates. Moving on, Google Lens now seems to be part of Google Search, Google Image Search specifically. If you go to images.google.com and you want to do a reverse image search, Google is now using Google Lens finally. Google's been talking about using Google Lens on image search for reverse image search for several years now. I've been talking to them about why you're not switching it, and they said we are. And now it's finally there. This came from 9 to 5 Google. Really great. So I love Google Lens is magical. Definitely take a look at it. It's pretty cool. Google Search Console will not, in any time soon, report on specific traffic and impressions and clicks and so forth driven by Google Lens. So yeah, Google Lens is now implemented on image search, and it's being used more and more widely. It's really, like I said, magical, but you're not going to get any data from Google Lens in Google Search Console, according to John Mueller, anytime soon. Who knows? Maybe we will, but he's saying he doesn't see it on the roadmap anytime soon. Talking about Google Search Console, the performance report for Google Discover traffic was wonky on July 26th. Google said there was a data logging issue. So if you saw a drop in clicks and impressions, which is almost impossible to say this drop was related to that drop, it was related to that drop, because Google Discover is so finicky and so volatile that we don't even know what's going on with that. But in any event, on July 26th, Google said there was a data logging issue specifically with Google Discover, and any traffic you see, drops or whatever, may be related to that data bug. Again, just keep that note there, and there's an annotation in the Google Search Console report for you to check out over there as well. Google has updated its local spam guidelines, specifically around Google Posts, to say that any duplicate photos, posts, videos, and logos are considered spam. And because of that, the specific item may be removed and delisted from your actual Google business profile details. Now, this is not to mean that Google will suspend your profile. It's just to mean that those specific things that you post will be probably removed. Google Guaranteed is adding, it's pretty interesting. So Google Guaranteed is the Google local ads, and Google Guaranteed has added a disclaimer. Google Local Service Ads had added a disclaimer saying reviews do not constitute a guarantee, warranty, prediction on the outcome of your legal matter. Basically, Google is saying these Google Guaranteed Local Service Ads are not guaranteed as specifically reviews. This came from Curtis Boyd. It's a nice find there. Very interesting. Google now is supporting pros and cons structured data for your reviews on your products. This is an update to the product's structured data help documentation. And now you can actually use that specific schema, structured data, pros and cons for your products, which basically Google will use if it finds valuable. Google said it will use that over using automatically crawled content for pros and cons, which Google has been showing pros and cons for a while now. But now Google is going to say we'll use your structured data if it's there. Otherwise, we'll just try to get it from your page itself. Gary said from Google basically that if you use a no index in a set of Hreflang clusters, so you have 5 different URLs in a cluster of Hreflang for international SEO purposes, Google, and you have one of those URLs is set to use a no index, it might go ahead and say, use that no index across the whole cluster. So be very careful with that. That was said in the last week's Search Off the Record podcast. We are seeing a drop, at least recently, in the FAQs rich results and a rise in the people also ask FAQs. And then if you go ahead and limit it to the shopping niche, we're seeing a drop in the stars reviews rich results, specifically in the shopping vertical. That was spotted by Aleda, which is pretty cool. And the other ones were spotted by Rank Ranger and SEMrush and all the other tools, which is pretty, very, very cool. Google said that dynamic rendering is a workaround and not a long-term solution, and you probably should not use it. So Google always said dynamic rendering is a workaround for JavaScript websites for improving their indexing. Google came up with that workaround as a solution for indexing issues and so forth. But now Google has updated their documentation to make it very clear and bold. They actually went ahead and used a red background. You can see it here in the screenshot as opposed to a blue background. So it's very interesting to see Google update that, and it makes sense. Google has also updated their follow feature documentation, basically saying that you should use descriptive titles for your RSS feeds for the Chrome follow feature, just like you use descriptive titles for your title tags. And also you should use a single feed. You could use multiple feeds, but they recommend use a single feed so it doesn't confuse Google. Google has clarified that the values in your product structure data for the GTIN values should all be in numeric form. They don't want it in any other form. Make sure it's in numeric form. And Google also added to the GTIN documentation that you can use GTIN 12 property, which was always supported, but they just wanted to clarify that you could use the 12 if you wanted to, in addition to all the other ones. Google has removed the rich media files best practices help documentation, which Google basically had in there talking about Silverlight and Flash, and Google just completely 404 that documentation, which talked about best practices around implementing rich media on your website. Google actually 404'd it. And the reason they did this, and they said, which is pretty funny, the reason they removed it, and I quote, turns out it's not 2005 anymore. Pretty funny, like that one. Google Keyword Planner has launched a newish feature, which allows you to use the keyword planner and then organize your keywords into ad groups. This was a limited beta, now it's fully rolled out. This was spotted by Takor Aziz. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Google Search is testing, or it actually launched, I believe, an image preview overlay on. You go to Google Web Search and you like search for flowers, and you click on images over there. You'll see this overlay as opposed to it taking you to image search, which we discussed a while ago. Now it's fully live. It actually does this overlay, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if it's live in all countries, but definitely live in the US. Google is testing search refinements for autocomplete directly in the desktop search results. So this was spotted by Manny Cobb, I'm sorry, pronounce your name, and also Punent. So definitely cool. And I don't see this myself, but it's definitely being tested. And Google is testing new designs for site links. This is pretty cool as well. Google's constantly testing designs for site links. This was spotted by Quentin Asbit on Twitter, as well as SadAK, and some others actually. So people are actually seeing these new site links, which is pretty cool. In any event, thank you so much for listening to the Search Buzz video recap. Sorry, it's a little bit longer than usual. I hope everybody has a great, safe, healthy weekend. Again, this is the search news we covered over at the Search Engine Roundtable at SEOroundtable.com. Today is Friday, August 12th. Thanks to SEMrush for sponsoring. Deeply, deeply appreciated. Everyone have a great weekend and see you guys next. Goodbye.